Hey, this is Andrew from Precursor Productions, and in this video we're going to talk about what should it cost to basically record, mix, and master an individual song, and even a whole 10-song album. Now this is a really difficult question to answer, and I think that most engineers, studio owners, etc. will sidestep this question. And I understand why, because the reality is that there's all kinds of different factors and variables that go into recording a record or a song. One of the main problems is you don't know as an engineer or as a producer whether people can play their instruments and perform their parts. So I'm going to say that the rest of this video basically assumes that you as someone coming into the studio have done your preparation, that you have a completed song, that you have the ability to perform that song to a reasonable level, and that you're willing to work with the people in the studio to get what needs to get done to get your album sounding as good as possible or your song. Now that said, the price range can really vary because some people are very quick and efficient in the studio and others need multiple takes to do things over and over again. And then we do a process that's called comping, which is based on the word compositing, where we basically edit those takes together into a final product. Now in most modern recordings there's a fair bit of editing and compositing, but certainly as engineers and producers we like it when someone can just come in and nail something on an individual take or in a couple of takes, and we can do less of that type of editing, because editing can really drive up the time and the price of the process. Now that said, for an individual song you could be looking at something as minimal as $100 to do some basic recording if it's an extremely minimalistic song with a simple arrangement, and it could be as much as $500 if you have some more elaborate things that you need to do. And when you start getting into recording things like full drum kits, where you have multiple microphones set up or instruments in that nature, percussion and drums, then that can drive up the cost a bit because the actual setup time becomes a little higher. So you could get up to $1,000 per song for the recording end if you have an elaborate drum setup and you need to do multiple takes. But a good ballpark for a lot of independently done recordings that can be made to sound very professional is the $100 to $500 range. We feel very strongly that that is the range where you can still get a very good product if everybody is well prepared coming into the studio. Now on the mixing side of things, things can vary greatly. If you're working with a top mix engineer, you can get into the thousands of dollars, but in an independent recording, I think it's quite realistic to be in the $100 to $500 per song range and get a good mix. Now once again, that depends on the complexity of the material. If you have a very dense song with lots of instrumentation, lots of changes, then the mix engineer is going to simply have to put a lot more time into getting that song mixed right. If you have a fairly simple arrangement, then usually you can get a very good mix in a lesser amount of time. So it does vary depending on those factors as well too. But most professional mix engineers should be able to do things in a matter of a number of hours. A mix usually takes between 2 hours and 8 hours per song. Now another factor is mastering. Mastering is usually not a very time-consuming process, and the price range from that can range from $50 through to about $200 per song, although we feel pretty strongly that $100 per song is a good amount to budget for a record. Mastering can be done in stereo or in stems, and stereo mastering is the most common form of mastering. It's usually pretty quick. Stems is a little more involved, but many mastering facilities are now working with stems because although it takes a little bit more time on their part, they can usually get a better, quicker product for their clients. So it often doesn't cost you very much more to work with stems. It's something you should consider because it does usually let the mastering engineer do a better job. Now, as far as a 10-song album, we would just multiply those costs out. You're definitely starting to get into the thousands of dollars for a 10-song album, but I think that if you were to budget something between $3,000 and $6,000, that's a realistic price. But it's usually best to record a song with a prospective new producer or studio and see how that goes, and then it'll give you a pretty clear sense of what your budget should be for the rest of the project. So often, if it's the first time for you working together, that will be an approach that you may wish to consider. At the end of the day, one thing that we really encourage in this day and age, since so many of the tools are so inexpensive, easy to use, and readily available, is to consider buying an audio interface and with your laptop or desktop computer, learning a little bit of basic recording so that you can take on some or all of the recording tasks on your own. Now that might sound really intimidating for somebody who's already writing the music and responsible for performing the music, but recording in many cases is a fairly straightforward task, and while you might not be up to a really complicated recording like setting up a whole mic setup and recording a drum kit, it may be possible for you to record things like keyboards, guitars, some of the vocals, and other instruments, and do a very good job of it if you have some basic skills. So consider getting some training, which is itself quick and inexpensive, and in your jam space, your home, your spare room, doing some or all of the recording yourself, and then finding a good producer, mix engineer, and mastering engineer to touch that up for you. It's definitely one of the ways you can cut a lot of costs down on your record in a short amount of time and get a fantastic product. So if you'd like to learn more about how to get the most out of your experience in the studio, simply head over to precursorproductions.com and sign up for our email list. When you do that, I'm going to send you 20 videos that outline how to save time, money, and get the best product when you're working in the studio. I'm also going to offer you 10% off of any of our professional audio production services. So head over to precursorproductions.com, enter your name in our mailing list, and you'll start getting those videos and the discount immediately.